You're listening to Cinema Snarks. I'm Larry.
And I'm Ren.
And we are going to tell you how we really feel. So it is the 4th of July weekend. Hey!
Hey! And we are wearing our patriotic best, but you can't see it in an audio format, but we are.
Rocking that USA, like Olympics shirt here. Mm-hmm. Nice, translucent, shiny.
I'm wearing a blue and red ensemble, but my skin is white, so I will use that as my white portion of the red, white, and blue.
And as people do around 4th of July, I am sorry if you hear any sort of yard tools in the background. Lots of that is going on outside my window here. So
at least it's not like last year when there were fireworks every single day in June leading up to the 4th of July.
Yeah, they've been out and about recently, but I can forgive that. Last year, though, it was just like from the end of May all the way through to past the 4th of July, every single day.
Outrageous. And at 1 a.m, it was so bad that Whoopi Goldberg talked about it on The View. And I don't watch The View, but my husband watches The View. And so I saw it and I thought it was hilarious that apparently it was not a Denver localized issue.
Okay. It's everywhere.
It was pandemic overexuberance. Here we are in the almost not as much pandemic. Here in America, anyways.
Hoping tail end now with this new strand variant.
Let's. I have to say, we got to be a little bit excited about America this year because we kind of killed it with the vaccine situation.
We did,
and my husband's family is visiting from foreign countries, and they are horrified by the number of people that are walking around without masks on, and we're like, guys, we're pretty ready to just live life again. It's cool.
The vaccination rate is pretty good. Pretty solid.
It's not what we would hope, but we also hope everyone would wear a mask.
Yeah, well, they got to stick it to us one way or another, I guess.
So yay, America. We're here on the 4th of July. And we promise you we're not going to do a free for all America rocks episode.
That's not the kind of people or podcast we are on here. We're not going to trash America. So this is also not a for America Sucks podcast, but
fair and balanced.
Let's not use that slogan. Please, Jesus. But so we have a few different categories, Ren. What are we talking about today?
Okay, so we're going to cover what I have deemed the true 4th of July films. So these are the ones that are actually centered on the Revolutionary War, right? Because the 4th of July is about the American Revolution. And then we're going to kind of cover some of those films that are just kind of they feel patriotic. They make you kind of happy to be American. We're going to talk about the good ones and the bad ones. And then we're going to kind of move into those ones that are a little bit more just about the American dream in general, which will essentially bring us into the problematic American dream films. And then we can move into the full-on anti-America films that show where America can be doing better. And in some cases has eventually done better, but did some absolutely horrifying things in the past. So that is what we are going to be talking about today. I think we, of course, here on the 4th of July should start with the true 4th of July films. And
I have to admit, we both admitted to ourselves, if you are listening and wondering where all the classic Westerns are when we speak about American films and patriotic experiences, that is, the Westerns definitely leaned on that type of atmosphere. However, it's a big blind spot in my filmography. It's actually probably the biggest blind spot in my filmography.
I think actually we should absolutely try and do a Western episode at some point because you and I both have a little bit of a blind spot there. Yeah. But also I would argue there's quite a big chunk of the Western film legacy that isn't
American
There's
at
spaghetti
all.
westerns, so they're like half Italian people. It's directed by an Italian person, and like a lot of the like production is all Italian people, and it's kind of more like a American fantasy than it is like an American film. So I still, either way, I don't think that a vast majority of the westerns would fit into this particular range. But I did actually went to the Western Museum in Oklahoma City and was blown away by the depth of the Western film history. So
Yeah, I
one
mean,
of these
it
days
is.
we will get into that.
It's a big part of film history. It was the genre of film for quite some time. Just not one that has interested me, but having blind spots, recognizing those blind spots, and educating yourself on them is always an advantage. I've seen plenty of films that I did not have any interest in watching just because I felt I should see them. So, also though, a couple other just transparency things. Neither one of us are the biggest war film fans. There are some
Right.
great ones. Some war films I do love, but usually a war film, I'm like, okay, here we go. But
Yeah. I tend to be of the opinion that like a war film is a war film. They're all kind of the same. I know, I understand that they're not all actually the same, but there's like it's the same general conflict of like there is a war and it is a thing and it is happening and it's just a lot of explosions and like things flying in your face and things like that. We did talk, my favorite war film ever is 1917, but that is not on this list because it is about British soldiers.
It's in fact not about American. It's about British patriotism, but we're American, so we're going to be talking about American patriotism today. I'm sorry
from
to
this
our foreign listeners. Feel free to leave us with films that celebrate your country's patriotism as well. But if there is a country that is infamous for being patriotic, I do think it is the United States of America. Yes, especially around Olympics time and sports times, we do see all the other countries get really into that patriotism thing. But year round, you can go anywhere in the United States and see American flags flying. You hear all about America being the greatest all the time. So if there's a country that takes patriotism to the next level, I think it's America.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of countries kind of put that energy into just their sports, their like soccer teams more than anything else, and we have plenty of that energy for sports and America.
And our problem is we don't compete with the rest of the world in a lot of our sports very
so
often.
Think we're great.
We just compete with ourselves. So
what is it? The World Series? That's just American.
World Series. I mean, I guess we invite Canada into basketball and hockey. So
sure. Yep. There are international players on the hockey team.
They're really trying to get the rest of the world to accept the NFL. We always have our games over in London every year now, a couple of games trying to get them interested in American football, but whatever. The World Cup, America most of the time couldn't care less.
And of course, America can't get into soccer. No. You have to get into our sport that nobody else is into. We're not going to get into the sport that you guys are all into. Yes, I know we took the best player that you have for one of our teams, but it doesn't matter. We don't care.
It's just, So
but our women's team is killer and we still don't care. It's okay. Great. Excellent. We don't need to keep talking about America. We want to talk about
American movies.
Yes.
And movies that center around some sort of patriotism or the state of America. Another caveat I had as I was doing research trying to compile my own list, the patriotism is not really my jam. So a lot of general patriotic films I don't know that I've seen. So I had to go a little bit more abstract maybe as I went through some of these. We have the classics, of course.
Yeah. Yes.
We'll get into that as we move through.
So I am a patriot. I am patriotic. I am not a nationalist. There is a big difference between those two things. And
stop the podcast. I mean, I'd have to stop the podcast and sever the friendship immediately if she was an
Exactly.
astronaut.
So I often ask people like, what's your war? I know that's weird. And I've already talked about how like I don't like war films, but I have found that like people that are into history tend to pick like one war that they're like really into, that they've like learned the most about. So I know a little bit about the Civil War. I know a little bit about World War II. I know like next to nothing about World War I, but I know a crap ton about the Revolutionary War. Prior to living in Philadelphia and being a tour guide in Philadelphia, where I learned all about the revolution and America's founding, I was already a nerd because all the girls out there will remember American Girl dolls, and Felicity was absolutely my favorite. And I think that was probably where my interest in the Revolutionary War lied. I think my affection for the Revolutionary War is tied to my patriotism, because I think that was the point in American history when you could really be excited about what America stood for. And there was a lot of other points in American history where it's like, ugh, problematic.
Yeah.
I think maybe World War II, you've also got like a resurgence of like, yeah, America's kick ass. But I think that America was kind of at their best, and it's a really inspiring story to me, because we basically were just like a bunch of farmers and like convicts, ex-convicts, and like just like rejects from Europe that were here living in the United States, but that wasn't the United States. We're in the colonies. Yeah. And we basically took on the biggest military force in the world, and we won. And of course, like anybody who's like a war nerd will understand that that's not exactly how it went. And like a lot of it has to do with like they had endless resources to fight the war, but also like, did they really want to spend all that money on us and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, we won. If you go to England, they'll talk about how they let us go. We beat them and we won. And I really appreciate that the United States had these very lofty ideals, especially for the time. And we basically launched the democratic government wave that started to form throughout the world, which we kind of set an example for for democracy. And I think democracy is super important. I think democracy is certainly much better than whatever they have going in China. I'm just going to say it. Their weird form of democracy. It's not really democracy. I think, I think democracy has problems, has flaws. I think it is the best, worst option. If you have a better idea, we can argue about it, but I feel pretty firmly about this. But anyways, so I really like the revolution, and I that's why I'm a patriot. Is I think that at the very least we had some lofty ideals, and we really did start from a place of like wanting better for ourselves and humanity. It just like took us a while to get there, and we're still working on it. But so from that standpoint, the 4th of July films, right, the ones that are like officially about the Revolutionary War, there are not a lot of them. For whatever reason, there's a few made-for-TV series that are pretty good, but we're not even going to talk about those because they don't count. They're not movies. So it's a pretty short list that we have. The first one is The Patriot. It's also on a lot of lists for one of the worst films ever made.
You'll find it on both.
About a war.
You'll find it on both awkwardly.
I liked The Patriot. I was absolutely in love with Heath Ledger when I was in the demographic to be in love with Heath Ledger. So I very much enjoyed that. My mother was really into Mel Gibson. There's lots of reasons not to be into Mel Gibson anymore, but it was like kind of this fun little thing where
everyone
like,
loved Mel Gibson.
Yes, at the time everybody loved Mel Gibson, right? And it was basically like American Braveheart, right? It was straight up American Braveheart. It was like he just remade Braveheart but for America. And that's fine. I liked The Patriot. I thought it was fun, and I don't get a lot of Revolutionary War films. Yeah. So, Larry, you're making like these faces like,
I mean, it's okay.
How you feel?
It's a little bit cheesy for me.
Mm.
it's a little much overall for me, but Braveheart is also a little bit much for me. And
Wow.
that one is a lot more false, I think, overall than the Patriot. But you know, you do what you do, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's just some of these overblown feeling like Mel Gibson movies. Everybody loves them. They are very well loved by the general public. It's okay. I don't hate the Patriot, but I also don't love it.
That's fair. I don't have a lot of other things to say about the Patriot other than the fact that like
Heath Ledger's great.
Heath Ledger's great.
Always.
It broke my little heart. I think Mel Gibson has some good moments of like actually trying to act and do like his acty thing. He had a period where he was real good and we liked him. Tis a shame. But other than that, it's like, you know, it's just we have a limited amount. But moving into the ones that I like really love. And this is another one that's like questionable. I love National Treasure. I think it is a national treasure. So yeah, I think it's great. It's got all these little silly nuggets and like it's got all kinds of things that are like nonsense and don't make any sense, but it's fun and it's a heist sort of film and it like really draws in so much of the Revolutionary War and important figures in the Revolutionary War. That I enjoy it. I think it's a good time. You get little fun facts in there here and there. And it's just fun. And I think that the 4th of July should always be centered on fun. All right. It's a day to have barbecues and shoot explosions into the sky. So that says explosions in the sky says Nicolas Cage to me. 100%.
Who didn't love National Treasure growing up? Like if you were like a younger age in the mid 2000s, National Treasure was a lot of fun.
I gets a lot of crap.
Revisited it recently, so I can't talk about its quality from an adult point.
I revisited it probably like last year. I watched it and picked up a lot more of the discrepancies that just like don't like things that just don't make any sense. Like why would you do that? Why this doesn't make any sense? Just logical inconsistencies, things like that.
It's a Nicolas Cage movie at the end of the day, right?
Exactly, and it's fine. It's okay. It's fun.
Yes,
I'm happy with it just being fun. So that's National Treasure. And I think, it gets too much crap. I think it's a great 4th of July film. If you want to like sit in that Revolutionary War history place.
It's one you can watch like with your whole family that doesn't want to sit down to watch The Patriot or one of these war films that are too old for them. You can watch National Treasure.
Totally. National Treasure. It's great for kids. And then 1776. So this is one that not everyone has heard of, and I love it. I think so 1776 is a Broadway musical.
There you go.
It's turned into a film. If you've ever seen Boy Meets World, Mr. Feeney, that actor plays John Adams. And there's just like iconic song where they just like are arguing about what the national bird should be. And in his Mr. Feeney voice, he just keeps saying, the eagle. And so that will forever be legendary in my mind. And it's basically one of the only films you have, like quality wise, that actually covers like the creation of the United States of America, like the writing of the Declaration of Independence. And I don't even think they get into the Constitution and all that stuff. Maybe they do. I haven't seen it in a very long time. But it's fun. It's a musical. And it is the original Hamilton. So if you really liked Hamilton, it is possible you will not like 1776 because it is a totally different musical style and is just a bunch of white dudes. But also, if you liked the historical interest of Hamilton, then 1776 is kind of like the precursor to that. There's also another one called Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, but that one's like not as good. And it's Andrew Jackson's kind of a shitty president in history.
Ryan on Twitter said that this is his favorite patriotic film that he watches every year with his
Nice.
dad for 4th of July.
Nice. Oh,
So
good.
I
Yeah.
have not seen it. Sorry.
Oh, I think we'll have to sit down and watch it
But
sometime. You should
I
watch it
also
this year
haven't
for the
seen
4th of
Hamilton.
July.
So there you go.
Oh my God. All right. So that's the next thing on our list. We weren't sure if Hamilton should count as a movie because it's basically a play that was filmed. And Larry, you're talking about the Emmys also didn't know what to do
Yeah,
with it.
nobody knew what to do with Hamilton.
No.
Disney didn't really know where to push it. I mean, nobody knew. So it was just
Yeah.
a big like, oh, what is this?
But Hamilton is arguably, I think of those movies, I think Hamilton is probably my favorite. I think from a story coverage point, the story is great. I think Alexander Hamilton is a very interesting history in the formation of the United States. I think his story is one of the best of the founding father stories. The only one whose story is better is Benjamin Franklin, and I need a Benjamin Franklin musical soon. That guy is ridiculous. Let me tell you, spreading syphilis all over Europe and the United States.
Well, there you go.
And making crazy amounts of inventions, being the most productive human ever. When I used to give my tours in Philadelphia, there's Ben Franklin's grave, and there is a plaque right next to his grave that just like lists his accomplishments from just select accomplishments throughout the course of his life. And if you ever want to feel like you are a failure of a human being, go look at the plaque of the limited amount. It's like huge. There's like 50 things on there.
Gosh.
I don't understand how there are that many items in that man's life. I mean, he lived a really long time for that time period, but still, he was like in his 70s when he died. It's not like he had that much extra time, and he didn't even have electricity really. So Benjamin Franklin, but Alexander Hamilton also is very interesting, right? Because he's got that immigrant background. The other founding fathers, for the most part, were born in the colonies, but he came and he's got this great story of like having skill and talent, right? All the other founding fathers, they had money. Yeah. John Adams had like some money, but not really. John Adams was like, but like, you know, Thomas Jefferson had money. George Washington had money. Like, so Alexander Hamilton is like this impressive sort of person because he really did literally come from nothing and then became this huge part of forming the United States. And arguably the United States would not continue to exist without him and the work that he put into it. So Hamilton's story is incredibly inspiring. There's a reason that Lin-Manuel Miranda read Alexander Hamilton's biography and was like, I gotta make a musical about this. Like inspired. And there's a reason why that musical is the zeitgeist that it is, because I think it crosses these boundaries. I think it's got this amazing musical style, which we talked a little bit about in our very first episode, that is super unique and sort of triggered people into this, wow, this is different. I really like this. And I think it actually helps tell the story in a way that you don't get as much with lyrics in songs. Because you're kind of confined to the structure of a song in a musical, you don't have the freedom, I think, that Lin-Manuel Miranda creates with his way of writing hip hop songs that kind of like bounce through the points that he's trying to make and kind of create dialogue in these really engaging ways. Also, everybody's an amazing singer, and you gotta love the fact that like it's all of these people of color that are talking about founding the United States, and you know they mention this like this immigrant story, and it really has to start to drive home this concept of like who's responsible for what makes America great, and it is the mix of people that we have. So yeah, Hamilton's easily my favorite like Revolutionary War thing as far as like movie media goes, but you know, it is questionable whether or not it's like actually a like film. Yeah. But it came out 4th of July last year. That's what I did for the 4th of July. I sat watched it immediately on Disney Plus, and Larry needs to sit and watch it as well, so he knows what the rest of the world is talking about. Anyways, that's it for the patriotic films, because that's about it. There's some other stuff, but nothing significant. Dory.
Yeah, there's my little chihuahua.
She strongly disagrees with my assessments of what counts as a 4th of July film. She'll tell you how she really feels.
Yeah, she definitely will.
She'll tell you that she hates me for whatever reason. Every time I come over, she is outraged that I exist in her
She
space.
senses that Ren is present somewhere.
She heard
somehow.
my voice. She's like, how dare
she's
you
over it.
Get out.
Yes. All right.
So that's all that's the official 4th of July ones. That's what we're at. So let's move into the more generally patriotic films. So this is where you get the legendary, the 4th of July film of films, Independence Day.
Yes, right. Independence Day. I mean, I feel like even though it's a story about aliens invading Earth, yeah, when you think 4th of July movie, of course it is titled Independence Day, but if it's not the first movie that pops into your head, it's one of the first 3 that you would list off is Independence Day as a 4th of July movie. And, you know, Roland Emmerich, you say what you will about him and the type of films he makes and what he ushered in terms of blockbusters. But when he's good, his movies are really fun. And Independence Day is a perfect example of that. Is it great? Maybe not. It's not like an ode to filmmaking. It's no Citizen Kane, but it's a whole lot more fun than Citizen Kane ever was. And
who doesn't want to watch Will Smith beat up an alien? Not beat up an alien corpse. I think that's probably even better.
You know, and you have who else is in here? Freaking.
Is it Vivica A. Fox?
Vivica A. Fox. I was like, who is it? Vivica A. Fox was so good in this movie. Ren's fave, Bill Pullman.
Bill Pullman. Well, he's my fave because I did a play with him once.
Yes, and his iconic speech in this film, one of the most iconic movie speeches, really, of all time.
Easily. And it's got that, and I think part of it, like, first of all, it's amazing speech altogether. But I think there's something about Bill Pullman's like that gravelly voice. He's such a good president. I know lots of people who are like, that's the only president that I believe should be ruling the United States, running the United States. He's the only one I recognize.
It resurfaced, but I had already heard this, I think a couple years back, that Will Smith originally was not going to be cast because they were scared that a Black lead actor couldn't sell overseas. So they also weren't going to pay for his like promotional tour even after the film to go
he was such a big celebrity.
And clearly they were very wrong. And Will Smith was the late 90s superstar. Like, if there was a bankable actor in Hollywood, it was Will Smith at that time. He sold Wild Wild West. Speaking of Westerns, he sold that craziness. And he is, again, you know, Will Smith, I think, doesn't get maybe as much credit as a dramatic actor as I think he deserves, because I do think he's a very good dramatic actor. But he really perfected just charismatic,
also
fun to watch actor. Like, he was just a joy to watch. And in this film, he was perfect.
And who better represents America than Will Smith? Like, he also did not come from money. Listen, let me just preface this with, I don't believe in that bootstraps bullshit. I think there's like problems with that mentality here in the United States.
Which we'll talk about in the American Dream section.
But that doesn't change the fact that it's like inspiring when people start from next to nothing, and they make Will Smith didn't just like
Find a
make
way.
something of himself. He like made several somethings of himself, right? Like he was like, I'm just gonna be a TV star, and I'm going to be a music star, and I'm going to be the highest paid actor, and I'm going to then show you that I'm not just a comedic actor, that I can also kill it as a dramatic actor. And then my most recent thing that I love is he got fat over the pandemic, and he like put it on TikTok and was like, I feel disgusting. And now he's like working it out, and he's showing us his process. And like getting fat over the pandemic feels very American to me.
Who's more American? You're right.
And he feels, I mean, I feel like his children have, like somehow something happened with his children where they are not in touch with reality, but he always seemed to be very relatively down to earth. He always seemed like he has a sense of where he came from, I guess. And just like his children are a little whoo.
I don't know. He and Jada Pinkett, I'm not sure what was going on with their parenting, but you know, do your thing, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, Independence Day is fun. It's possibly Roland Emmerich's best film out of all of his big bombastic blockbuster.
What are some of Roland Emmerich's other films?
Like The Day After Tomorrow, 2012, Independence Day Resurgence, which was nowhere near good, and that was certainly a far cry from the first Independence Day.
When I did the Play with Bill, he was like flying out to go film the second Independence Day.
Okay.
And it was like, oh, cool. And then it like came out, and it was like, oh, whatever. I mean,
okay, you got a paycheck, Bill. That's good on
I
ya.
would have preferred he made a sequel to Spaceballs, but that is not in the cards, apparently.
I will say this about Roland Emmerich because of that second film. As an openly gay director, I wish he was a bit better at LGBTQ representation in his big bombastic blockbuster films. Because it was not great in Resurrection or Resurgence when he did try it. But otherwise, you know, he you know what you're getting when you're going into one of his films. And I think, unfortunately for him,
the end of the world.
That's all he makes is the end of the world. And unfortunately for him, I think he peaked early. And here we are. But
that seems common. Okay, so Independence Day, we have to agree, is amazing. Great. So other patriotic films that...
I think most war films fall under the patriotic
They
thing.
Do.
They're not surely about America, but they're always pro-America through soldiers.
So wait, okay, I was going to say, so before we get into the war films, I wanted to just, well, I guess it kind of counts. Captain America, right? So that's not technically a war film, but it is a little bit a war film.
I mean, it takes place with the World War I backdrop, and he goes to war. They literally are fighting in the war for most of the film.
Is it World War I or is it World War II? I think it's World War II. Because the Nazis? Isn't Red Skull a Nazi?
No, I mean he's Hydra. No. I'm almost positive it's World War I.
Okay.
Now
you got to look it up.
Yeah, now we're going to be looking.
I was pretty sure Red Skull Hydra was the Nazis.
I mean, Hydra is like kind of an allegory, I do think, for a
because Germans in World War I are like they just wear those weird helmets, and they're not as scary in World War I as they were in World War II.
Let's take a look.
I went to the World War II Museum in New Orleans, which, strangely enough, New Orleans, their number one attraction is the World War II Museum. It's not what you would have expected. But I learned a little bit more about what was going on. Those men were insane. World War II? Yeah.
Yeah, it's 1942. My bad.
The Nazis are terrifying. And the Hitler was, I mean, obviously, I don't know why I need to say this. Hitler was a madman. He was out of his mind, but he was like losing the war, and he was just like conscripting 9-year-olds into military service, which is crazy.
And then Jeeps. Sorry, I'm just like, duh. They had vehicles in Captain America, like a Jeep.
That's right. You're like, oh yeah, definitely
Yeah,
World War
no,
II.
oops, my bad.
Well,
Anyway,
that's the thing.
sorry.
Nobody cares about World War One.
No.
That's why Tom Hanks had to
Well,
do like
because
a whole thing about World War
World
One. He
War
was like, we don't
One.
have a memorial or
Well,
anything.
that's the problem. Is World War One, particularly when it comes to America, our involvement in World War One is very trivial. In the fact of like, it's very weird how we got involved.
Yeah,
The entire First World War is also just like has people being like, this really shouldn't have ever been. I don't know. It's like it doesn't have a common enemy.
yeah,
Yeah, we have the
yeah.
Germans,
But
but
yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't.
but like World War II, it was like you have these very clear, like absolutely insane enemies. So I mean, you have the Nazis, right? And that's like terrifying. But this is I didn't know as much about Japan, but apparently their leader they like respected like a god, and they were like they when they invaded people, it wasn't just the kamikaze pilots. It was like he had the entire country. He had like said it's like it was like some a million people, 13 million people, or however many people were living in Japan at that point, either will win altogether or die altogether. That's insane. I can't believe there wasn't that. Like, how do you fight a war against an entire group of people that would rather die than concede defeat?
Yeah.
Which I didn't understand. Like, I didn't understand the like extent of that insanity. But one of my favorite things that I learned, and this is like a little yay America thing about World War II, is that basically when we first got involved in World War II, we were like, we like fucked around a little bit and like kind of like messed up, and we like had a really hard time. And it was like, ha, the Americans, oh, they can produce our refrigerators and microwaves. And we were like, ha, fuck you, watch us fucking manufacture. And we basically manufactured our way into winning the war. We just like we had such a intense means of production, and everybody rallied so hard. Like we were producing so much stuff already, and then just when we shifted all of our factories over, we were just like behind. And one of the interesting things is I think Japan. One of the dumbest things that happened in World War II was Japan bombing the United States, because when they did, right? And then we can talk about Pearl Harbor, which is a nightmare of a film. But that was one of the dumbest things that the Japanese did, because basically that got us involved in the war way sooner. And if we had not gotten involved when we did, they might have taken they might have taken much more. They would have been way more ahead of us in terms of manufacturing. But because they came at us, we ramped up our production and we started building all of these things and all of these planes and these new types of bombs and things that basically we ended up like outproducing the Axis powers. So if they would have just left it alone, I think there's like a quote about how the Japanese were like, I think we might have woken up a sleeping giant. Yeah. Fuck yeah, you did. So that was my like, yay, America moment for World War II. But
it's Wonder Woman that's set in World War One. My bad.
Oh, yes.
They are very thematically
on the list, Larry.
Well, he is. That's another weird one. I mean, it's like America, British, like, because it's like British intelligence.
Yeah.
It's another weird one with America.
And Wonder Woman's technically not American.
She's scaring, but
she's an immigrant. Right?
Those two, there's backdrops are so similar, yet they're not even about the same war. Captain America, the Force Soldier, and Wonder Woman. But my bad. So I think Captain America is probably the best a superhero has done at like really being pro-America.
Yeah.
But it did show a little bit of the like ridiculousness of some of the war. And obviously it led Captain America down a much different type of patriot path that I did enjoy his character going in later films. But in this first one, he's very much convinced of the American cause and what he's fighting for and all of that fun jazz. And it's
which makes sense, right? Because at that point in time, it was much more clear than it got as America kind of moved on. It was like the imminent danger of the Nazis and the Japanese. I know technically Italy was like part of the Axis powers, but they kind of like crapped out pretty freaking early. We like landed in Sicily and we were like, hey guys, and then
I
like
mean,
took
that's
over
what's
pretty
just funny
immediately.
is like France and Italy doing exactly the same thing in both wars. Like France getting sacked early on, and then Italy like noticing that they're on the losing side and jumping ship
So
and being like,
if you,
okay.
this is one of my other favorite stories about World War II. So there's this thing called the Maginot Line. And basically after World War I, when France got like totally sacked, they were like, you're not going to do this to us again. And they like fortified this entire like border with Germany. And they were like, oh, you're not going to come through. And Germany was like, okay. And then they like invaded Belgium and then just came in through another country. And so it's like, so I think that's a great description for the wall that they want to build on the border with Mexico. Like, great, build a wall. Like they can't get around it or over it or under it or fly over here in a plane. It's just it's a Maginot Line.
Again, and that conversation and green card expiration being one of the heaviest contributors to quote unquote illegal immigration is a different story. But yes, so Captain America, the First Avenger, I really enjoy it. I think it's not one of my favorite Marvel films per se, but I think it really captures the moment and captures that essence of Captain America.
When I first saw it, I don't think I really paid attention very well. And then I watched it a second time. I was like, oh, I really like this one. This is actually really good. And I liked Captain America a lot more. And I will say it's also a great, like, patriotic film because so like Captain America is chosen because he is a good person. And that is like that Captain America is America at its best, basically, is like when America is genuinely fighting for freedom and equality and what is right and good in the world. That is and what you want America to be.
His arc in the MCU, the MCU tangent, so good is that he continues to be that even when America itself and the powers that be are not that. So in the later films, he goes rogue because he still holds that ideal to his core, and America is no longer holding that to their core. And he realizes, oh, I'm not fighting for the side that I agree with any longer. So, and that's all set up here really well and establishes that heart to the character that carries on through the rest of his arc. So,
and then we watch Winter Soldier and the Falcon, and we learn so much more about what being Captain America means and what happens when you just hand a lunatic a shield.
Yes.
And you don't make a conscious decision about who should wield the shield, who needs the super serum, who can be trusted with that kind of strength and power. But anyways, that's not a movie, so we're not going to get into it any further. Anyways, so those are good.
Into war films through Captain America.
Yes. So you had a war film on there that you really liked.
I love, I had two. One dealing, once again, with one of the world wars, with Saving Private Ryan. Steven Spielberg classic, obviously, another award-winning film, where in the 90s, where Steven Spielberg was probably at his most prolific. Of course, we had earlier films that are classics of his, but just the 90s, he basically didn't miss. It was just like instant classic after instant classic after instant classic throughout the 90s. And he was an awards darling on top of a blockbuster darling in the decade. And it kind of caps
That's what you want as a producer.
Yeah, I mean,
winning me awards and making me money? Heck yeah.
Yes, we have Jurassic Park and Schindler's List within a year's time. Yes, that's what we want to happen. But then he kind of capped off the decade, the late 90s, with Saving Private Ryan, one of the many times we are trying to save Matt Damon. And one of the very many times Matt Damon needs people to come and find him and save him in film.
Wait. Which other ones are? This is a thing. Clearly, what other times are there?
It's like it's The Martian, and
what's
the other? There's another really evident one that I'm like blanking on right now. There's like a whole meme about it. Matt Damon needing to
be constantly needing to be saved.
But I think this is one of my favorite war films. Oh, Interstellar.
Oh, yes.
Another one where he's out there needing to be saved.
He's just got such a cute face. You just want to save it. It's adorable. He really does have that, like, sweet little dude face going
especially
on.
especially in the late 90s. He was
Yeah,
very like
he's
cute, needs to be
also
saved.
very like American Boy Next Door, right? He's got
Yeah.
that look going for him for sure.
Yeah, we have some great performances, obviously, here with
All right,
Tom
my brain just went
Hanks.
to the fact that in the Patriot, you just have two Australians playing
Well,
the main characters.
at least you have that here, Ren. It's mostly Americans, I believe, in Saving
Yes.
Private Ryan, playing
Yes.
American soldiers.
I liked Saving Private Ryan. I don't remember like a lot about it. I do remember like what I liked about Saving Private Ryan is the fact that they do spend a lot more time with the characters themselves.
Yes.
It's less about the war,
War.
which I
The
just
war is the
generally,
backdrop.
yeah, I'm generally less interested in the war than I am in like the characters.
And I think that's what I love
yeah.
is that Saving Private Ryan does really, obviously, it's kind of in the title itself. It really focuses on the bond of the soldiers and that bond you make, that like brotherhood or whatever that you make in war, unfortunately, but as a tight knit group. And I think it kind of shows that level of patriotism more than just straight up like flag waving war type of America wins. And I also had Glory, which focuses on the Civil War. And this is kind of floats the line of the American dream / just straight up patriotism, but it's about the Civil War. It's about slaves having to fight literally for their own freedom in the Civil War and taking up arms, starring Denzel Washington and an underrated performance from him. Matthew Broderick is in here. But
young Matthew Broderick, baby Matthew, like
baby.
just post Ferris Bueller Matthew Broderick.
Both of them are babies. Like Denzel looking real fresh faced in this film as well. It's a long one, as Ren pointed out when I first brought it up.
He told me he put Glory on there. I was like, Glory, like that 4-hour Civil War film.
It was very long. But it's always nice, and this is one of the first, I think, times. We've gotten a couple more instances recently, but this was like, what, late 80s version of showing some of the first Black soldiers in America and what that looked like for Black people to be fighting. And we've revisited that with something like The Five Bloods last year, really talked about, you know, fighting for a country that doesn't accept you and what really that feels like. But I think it was really just kind of a groundbreaking film in that sense, and one of the few films that does focus on Black soldiers in times when they weren't accepted by the country that they were fighting for, and in this case fighting for their own freedom.
That's so that's actually I was actually just thinking you said that, and I was like, you know, that would be one of the awesome things that they could do in terms of like a film, is they could actually create movies about the Black soldiers that were involved in the Revolutionary War. I'm actually currently trying to find the name because I am embarrassed that I keep on saying I should know the name of this person. So there was this badass. So here's the thing. In the Revolutionary War, the British actually offered to basically free any slaves that would fight for the British. So obviously, a lot of Black people, reasonably so, decided to fight for the British. There apparently were, I've read this other places too. There apparently were also like Northern brigades that did something similar, but for the most part, a decent amount of them were actually fighting for the British. But there is this one guy. Oh my God, I need to find his name, and I'm not coming up. So there is this one guy who he's a slave, and he ends up he basically is a spy for the Revolutionary War. He tells them that he's joining the British, and since he's Black, they think that he can't read or write, but he is actually a educated slave, and he can read, and he reads all of the battle plans that the general just left out on the table, and then gave all that information to the American soldiers, and basically won the war. He was pivotal.
Amazing story. Where's that fit? That needs to be
Because America, I know. So we need to make a movie about this. We basically want here's the fuckery of this film, right? Or this story. The fuckery of this story is after the war, he is supposed to be getting granted freedom for, helping us win it. And they're like, nah. And they just like send him back to the South to slavery. And he ends up like going to court over and over again, trying to get them to honor this agreement that was made that he should be given his freedom. And they don't finally give him his freedom until the goddamn Marquis de Lafayette, this war hero from France, comes back from France and goes to the judge and says, this guy is the reason that we won the war. He is do anything and everything that he asks for in return for what he did to help us win the war. And then he finally gets his freedom. So that would be a sick ass movie. And I think we should do it. And I don't know why I don't know the name of the person. And it's embarrassing, but we should all know this name. Anyways.
I mean, we shouldn't be surprised because Harriet Tubman just got a film, like an iconic figure such as Harriet Tubman just got a feature-length film for the first time. So minor people of color are not getting the films.
So his name was James, and because the Marquis de Lafayette is the person who finally shows up and like makes sure he gets freed, he ends up changing his last name to Lafayette. So his name is James Lafayette. So we should make a film about James Lafayette, and you should all read his story and learn about it. But anyways,
other than World War II, I think it's between World War II and the Civil War probably that have been explored the most through film. Again, because I think there's something to grasp onto there. Obviously, Nazis and Hitler himself are a good villain for a movie type of story. And slavery as a
villain
institution is a good villain, and you can make any slave owner a good villain for your story. So I think those two have been two of the most explored. Obviously there's still a lot of work to do with the Civil War because it has still been mostly told through a really white lens, how we've done it, and a lot of celebrating northern white people in their role in ending slavery. So it's not been the best representation of the Civil War itself, but we even have something like Lincoln, which is an Academy Award winning film, Daniel Day-Lewis, obviously with Abraham Lincoln and his ideals. A little bit of a sanitized version, I'd say, of the history of what Abraham Lincoln was doing all of this for and why he did what he did. It's part of it, but also, he wasn't a holier than thou figure that I think all of us like to think of him as. But
so do we have any other good patriotic films on our list that we wanted to talk about? Because I want to move into the bad ones.
Yeah, so I'll just mention it, a cute little animated film that nobody watched except just a couple of us.
I haven't even seen it, but I know the story, and it's so cute, and it's perfect.
So Sergeant Stubby is this little animated film
based on a true story.
Yes, about this little dog who is a Medal of Honor level soldier who goes into war and saves all these people. He wasn't even really supposed to be there. But the film,
what was the thing that he did? He could smell something. He could smell.
Yeah. He would smell out something with the people, and it was responsible for saving a ton of soldiers' lives. And I'm forgetting I haven't watched it since the year it was released, which was a couple of years ago. I actually grabbed my little.
I think I remember reading the Wikipedia about it.
Yeah, so it was during World War One.
See, he comforted the wounded.
Yes.
And he once caught a German soldier by the seat of his pants, holding him there until American soldiers found him.
Yeah.
Wow. He's called the most decorated war dog of the Great War. And he was the only dog to be nominated and promoted to sergeant through combat. Wow. Yeah. Isn't there also an animated movie about pigeons during the war?
I think there's something about pigeons.
So I only bring this up because I went to the American Pigeon Museum. If you guys have caught on, I go to a lot of museums. But you should go. It's in Oklahoma City, and it's amazing. And there's like these stories of these pigeons. So pigeons have these amazing ability to just like fly back to their home from forever away, like thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away, and they have great
endurance. Why
endurance.
they were carrier.
Yeah, so they were this, and so like before, this is actually during like more like World War I. So before we had like telephone lines and telegraphs and things. This was also like a really secure way to send things. But like there's these stories of these freaking decorated pigeons that like flew through battlefields to deliver like these amazing the messages that they needed to win the battle. Like it's I get goosebumps thinking about the pigeons.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
I have a thing for the pigeons. I just think they're cute. I'm like this lone person in the world is like, oh, pigeons, and everybody's out like, those are flying rats. What are you doing?
I like pigeons too. I think they're much maligned. But I love most animals.
Much maligned.
But yeah,
but
so
you're
Sergeant
an animal
Stubby,
lover overall.
It's like a short movie. It's only 84 minutes long. The animation, it's not like Pixar level animation. It's a small studio who championed this film. Like they were so passionate about it. So it's a lesser animation, if you will, but we don't oh my gosh. We don't personify.
Anthropomorphize.
Thank you. Sergeant Stubby, he is a dog. He has a couple like cute little looks, but he doesn't talk or he doesn't do anything that's like too wild or crazy.
You know how I hate when the animals talk. I actually don't mind it when they're fully animated. I really don't like when the animals talk and they're supposed to be realistic.
He's just so cute, and it's such a cute story. And a cute story I think your kids will love to see this little dog, this little true story of this dog. They show pictures of Stubby himself, obviously, at the end of the film. So yes, I think that's a great movie especially for younger kids. I think it's a great film to show them.
So I found the movie about the pigeons. It's called Valiant. Have you seen that one?
Oh, yes. I was like, I know it sounds familiar.
And it's got I guess Ricky Gervais is one of the voice, and Ewan McGregor and Tim Curry. It actually sounds great, and I'm like, I think this might be my 4th of July film to watch. Yeah. This and that terrible,
Al Pacino
the terrible. I think it's just called Revolutionary, and it's I read about it. It was so bad that Al Pacino left acting for 5 years, and there was questions about whether or not he would ever return. And now I like have to see this film. So that might be my 4th of July picks.
What are the bad ones? What are the ones?
Bad ones. Like? Okay, so I like really needed to bring this one up. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Killer is so freaking bad. It's upsetting. I loved the book. I like picked it up. I was like, what the hell is this? This is amazing. I just thought it would be like a fun read, but actually the book does a really good job of tying the vampires in with the war, and like the vampires are like a big part of the southern basically. Okay, so the whole thing is that most of the slave owners in the South are vampires, and slavery basically sustains the vampire population in the colonies in the United States, and so that is like part of what leads Abraham Lincoln to become a vampire killer, and eventually like he starts as a vampire slayer, and he just becomes the president like by accident in this story. And it's like pretty historically accurate, and it kind of like works with everything in the book, and it's really interesting to say, oh yeah, I totally buy this Southern blood-sucking slave owners. That sounds, it's obviously supernatural, but like it sounds like a good allegory, right? It like works. And then freaking Abraham Lincoln Vampire Killer was garbage, just hot, bad CGI'd, poorly executed garbage that like didn't touch on the Civil War itself like at all.
Oh my.
It was absolute garbage, and damn, it was a shame because the book was actually really good. So
and it sounded so stupid, and then it turned out to be so stupid.
Yeah.
How sad.
And it's a shame because the book was actually really, really entertaining and really good, and like from a historical standpoint was like, oh wow, this is like fairly accurate. This is like it covers like that famous debate he had when he was becoming a senator, and like Brit ties it all into this. I love a historical fiction that like takes the fiction and actually ties it in with real history. I think that is the trick, right? Not to just make something up that's set in a historical time period, but to like teach you a little bit of something about history and tie it in with something fun like vampires. But yeah, so they've ruined it. It's horrible. And don't ever watch it. The next bad one is one that we agree on, Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yes, we both have this on our list.
Yeah, that one's very bad.
I mean, if you know me, you know I'm not a big romance person, and Pearl Harbor is a bombastic romance. It just is like it's very strange to me to tell the story of Pearl Harbor through a romance like this. I don't know, with Ben Affleck,
it was also like this very clear ripoff of Titanic. Like it was very clear that it was trying to just like ride the Titanic train, and it failed miserably because
Ren knows I love Kate Beckinsale. I love her.
Oh,
I probably would go through the war for Kate Beckinsale too.
I would love to find out. I've noticed this strange phenomenon of people in Colorado are like really into Kate Beckinsale, and I don't know what that's about. I'm not saying that she's not a gorgeous human being, but like they're specifically all about Kate Beckinsale. So if anybody has any information about what is going on with Colorado and Kate Beckinsale, would love to find out.
I understand it, Dan. I know why you would go through all of this trouble, but it just is.
So what is it? Is it Josh Hartnett is the friend, right? And Ben Affleck is the boyfriend that goes to war and vanishes, and then she has to like choose between the two of them because she's fallen in love with both.
I mean, and that's my big problem. Yeah, is it focuses on this love triangle, love story thing.
Instead of the epic war that's happening around
Pearl Harbor. Instead of the actual fact, the event that we named our title film after, which is very traumatic and very, like, again, very significant in the scheme of World War II.
As I said, when they woke the sleeping giant.
And it's like really cheesy. It's not Titanic. It's nowhere near like as good as Titanic. It doesn't have the romantic. We don't have any like Rose top of the world moments or draw me like your French girl.
Yeah,
we don't have any of those iconic moments here. It just is cheesy and ridiculous. Honestly, it's ridiculous. I can't with Pearl Harbor.
Then moving into the final one, which I think is a hot take, Top Gun. I think Top Gun is not a good film. I do think that Top Gun is an entertaining film, but it's entertaining in that like bad good way. Like it's absurd. It's a full on absurd, ridiculous. I like the word he used, bombastic, ridiculous film. Through and through, just like all like I think the part I always remember is like him like speeding around and cutting off traffic to like nearly killing someone to like show the lady that he's into her or something. I don't know. It was like the whole romance. Like I didn't buy the romance part of Top Gun. It didn't make any sense. I don't know. So
I just love Tom Cruise being like the bad boy, cool guy. That's what America loved then, for sure.
Very, very silly film. And you were asking me how I feel about the sequel, and I don't feel a lot of things about it. I think mainly it might be fun to see. Okay, so for me, there are two options. It will be terrible, or they will find a way to take the absurdity that made the first one charming and put it into the sequel without necessarily being too self-aware. I think it's going to be a really tricky balance. I think my bet is that it's going to be bad, but I think there is a shot if they can figure out. It seems to me like Top Gun is one of those like random magic things. It's like it had just the right combination of things in it that worked together to keep it entertaining, even though it wasn't really very good overall. It had like the right actors, the right time. It had the right music and the right, like, I don't know. it like worked for that time period. I think there's certainly lots of like 90s films that have that same level of like, this is ridiculous and doesn't make any sense. So I don't know how that will translate to a modern era. We'll have to see.
I had a couple in this like little patriotism thing that weren't war related. I have the sequels to Olympus Has Fallen, with London Has Fallen and Angel Has Fallen, the Gerard Butler franchise that won't die, that keeps going.
I can't believe Gerard Butler is making movies still. I had no idea.
Yeah, he keeps making disaster films, much like Roland Emmerich. All of his films seem to do with the end of the world. But
with your can only make a disaster then.
Yeah, it's always about Americans, him going into other countries and like saving them from these things. So when it was in Washington, I was cool because he was just like a bodyguard saving the president, and it was fine. It was a fun little movie. But then when he starts going to London and to all these other countries and like saves them, and they're highly stereotypical, especially with Middle Eastern people, which I don't love. It's a problem I have with American Sniper as well. It's very villainous when it comes to the Middle East in Clint Eastwood fashion. Plus that like horrible baby that turned into a meme. We can make fun of that all day long, but it has a lot of problematic stuff there. And then Clint Eastwood also did it with 1915 or 1715 or whatever. It was 1517 to Paris, which was terrible, across the board terrible. But he used the real people whose story it was and just put them in the movie. And they were terrible. Like they were not even partially good actors at all. And it was
have a Nomadland situation working out there. No.
Yeah, kind of, except they were the leads and who we focused on the whole time. We had no Frances McDormand. So I was like, no, put them as a cameo, Clint. That's how you respect them and pay homage. Put them as a cameo. Don't cast them as themselves. Like, this is outrageous. But it was another story of like going into Paris and the Americans like saving the people. You don't even have like good French people in that film. So that's where I think it goes wrong. Once we send Americans out to the world and save everyone in other countries, and all of their own people are just like on the periphery being saved by Americans and cheering us on. That's how you do patriotism wrong.
Definitely a trope. What was that Martin Scorsese film that just came out that was basically what happened? He got sent to China. Actually, my first thought was The Last Samurai. That is a very weird film. Slash 7 Years in Tibet. This is actually a very common trope of the American that goes, it's usually a white guy that does that.
And typically, they just ignore because yes, some of these are based on true stories and true people, but they just ignored the contributions from the hosting country. Like none of these people just came in here and did all of this on their own. They had help from that government and those people who live there.
Yes, but will Americans pay to see a movie about
a collaborative effort?
Hero?
So,
all right. So
subgenre, no, thank you.
Speaking of bad films, we're not getting there quite yet. Sorry, we don't want to get into the anti-Americans. We want to go back to the positive, and we want to focus on those those films that exemplify the American dream, that are not necessarily patriotic, but they're a little bit about what makes America good, what makes watching America grow, stories that are like inspiring and very American. So I think one of the big ones that we had right at the top was this. We actually kind of created this category for A League of Their Own, because it's not really patriotic. It's not a war film. It's definitely not
baseball. And what's more American than baseball?
That's true. Baseball's super American, and it takes place during World War II. So they're definitely dealing with what it's like. Like I was talking about World War II and basically like the manufacturing, that was all women that like rolled in and like took all the spots that all the men that went off to war were doing. And there really isn't a lot of films that are focused on women during World War II and what we were doing at home, because we weren't allowed to go to the war unless we were nurses. We were allowed to do that. But they also don't make any films about the nurses in World War II. But A League of Their Own is one of the only things that you get where you get anything about what women were doing back home and what they were doing that mattered, how it was still important to the war effort. and it's just such a good film. It's another Bill Pullman film. He's only there for like a hot second, but
hilarious.
it's so funny. It's Tom Hanks at like his funniest and his most. Actually, Tom Cruise is just Tom Cruise. Tom Hanks in this film is actually it's a little off his normal game, right?
Yeah.
He's usually very kind and sweet, and man, he is a grumpy D-bag in this film. And
yes,
it's like he's still charming, but damn, is he funny. And you know, I love Madonna in this film. It's one of the only times that I enjoy Madonna acting on screen.
Yeah, she's great.
She's so good. It's like that role is perfect for Madonna. Yeah. That's basically the only type of character she should be playing.
Yeah.
I mean, she's a different woman now. I imagine she could probably play something else. But at that time period, that was so her. Rosie O'Donnell, oh my God, love the lesbian Rosie O'Donnell before she'd come out, and she was clearly a lesbian in that film, but we're not going to talk about that. We
couldn't do that yet. We weren't there yet.
Oh, and there's the like ugly girl, which is like that's like a little bit problematic, but dang it, like her little story where she's the guy who's like super into her, and it's just so sweet. And yeah.
So, like you said, it's important because it is one of the few films out there that shows women doing something and how they had to fill these new roles while men were out fighting and killing.
Who doesn't cry in that film? Monsters. That's who. It's an absolute tearjerker. So anyways, A League of Their Own, we're putting that at the top of our American Dream type films.
Another one about women doing things. We said the Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures, yes, that one's great. And it's a newer one, and it was it's part of this wonderful new wave in film where they were like, hey, there's Black people, let's make films about them and cast them in films, and we're very excited about that. I think it is a problem that it seems to be a fad. I'm hoping it's not a fad and that it continues on, and that we, incorporate stories of lots of different types of people, because like I said, that is what makes America great, is the fact that we are not just this one group of homogenous people that have kind of like all lived in the same area forever. We're like a bunch of people from all over the world, and we have all different types of backgrounds, and we need more movies that are not just about white people and their white person experience. And Hidden Figures is an amazing story. Like, I'm like upset it wasn't made sooner, because it's just an amazing story. Like, that is kick-ass. That's kick-ass. This Black woman who's smarter than everyone else basically gets us to the moon. Like, what? Why didn't I know this already? There's lots of reasons. We don't need to get into all of them right now.
And I love that it made her kind of like a celebrity, because she's still alive. And that's another thing. I'm so glad, at the very least,
she
got was made before she passed away. Because she's quite old.
And I will say, I'm also glad that it was made with those actresses, because I think they were all just so good. Oh my God. Taraji P. Henson for me is just like, to say a cliche, she's a revelation. But I had not watched was it Empire that she was in? People loved her in that. I didn't watch the show, so the first like real exposure I had to her was in Hidden Figures, and I was like, oh my God, this woman's great. She's amazing.
Janelle Monáe is great.
Spencer,
we love always.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kick-ass roster of actresses, just period. And yeah, it was amazing. There's a little bit of that like Kevin Costner white savior thing. I think to a point you have to. I think to a point it's fair to point out that like at some point white people have to use their privilege when it's in those people have to use their privilege to, well, just in general, like white people should be using their privilege to help other people that are being oppressed, that are being limited wherever possible. So to that extent, I'm like, okay, then maybe that's a fair example. But yeah, I it doesn't center on the Kevin Costner character at all.
And he's still kind of an a-hole for the most part. Like, you're still kind of like, I don't really like him, but you know what? We have to use him, so let's
Yeah.
It's just like that one scene that's a little bit ridiculous of like knocking down the signs of like colored and non-colored or whatever
Yeah.
for the bathroom. That's the one like, oh, okay, we went calm down.
Take it down,
This is a
guys.
little bit feel goody, but we're okay. But we also wanted to talk about a really new one with Minari.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this one I wanted to talk about in the American Dream section because
Mhm.
honestly, I think it's the best depiction of like an American immigrant story I probably have ever seen personally. I think it's so well done. It exemplifies the American dream. That's what the whole movie is about.
Yeah, and I think you and I talked about this that like it was put in the categories for foreign
Oh my
films.
gosh, yeah,
There was like a whole thing because it
Hollywood Foreign Press.
wasn't in English. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, it was like half English, half.
It is the most
Korean.
American film. It was easily one of the most American films of the year. But it's so America. It's nothing but American. It's literally an American story. That story would not happen in another country. Maybe Canada. I don't know. But like, you know, like that. But they're farmers and they're trying to build a life. They're that bootstraps thing. And I think this is one of the better jobs of actually like pointing out the bullshit of that bootstraps like mentality of like you can work your ass off to pull up those bootstraps and you can still have everything go up in flames and just over and over and over things happen. Just nonstop stuff that's not necessarily in your control, right? Like and it's a great like I also think there's something about I don't know. So there's something about the family dynamic that feels very American, and I don't know. I think that there is something about family in general that is an American sort of like concept almost.
And it was a really interesting, this one particular, because you had like the little boy who definitely was pulling more toward American than like Korean. And that kind of like little bit of a cultural clash that I know, you know, obviously so many immigrants can relate to with their kids. Your kid is brought up from a very young age in America. They have a weird like cultural navigational system. But yeah, I think the film is one of the, as you said, it's a great exemplary job of showcasing the American dream for what it really is, the grime and the dirt of it all. And for most people, the majority, y'all, the American dream does not happen. That bootstrap bullshit does not happen. And trust me, most people are out here working pretty dang hard and will never get to that bootstrap top of the line type of thing.
Absolutely.
Sorry about it. It was a myth created by the rich. So there you go.
Anyway, to keep you just struggling at the bottom and going, well, I don't want any laws to get passed that might impact me once I am a millionaire because I'm working so hard to get there. Yeah, it's a trick. It's a trick. But in addition to Minari as an immigrant tale, I would also like to bring up An American Tale, our next animated American film. I loved this movie as a child. Actually, to be honest with you, I remember like laughing my ass off as a child watching Fievel Goes West specifically. I don't know. It was Dom DeLuise's cat like freaking out that seemed to just like tickle my fancy. I think if I watched it again as an adult, would not find it nearly as funny, but I remember loving it. And also Somewhere Out There is so good.
And it's another one that really, I don't know, it shows like a little bit of a more somber side when you get to that, but it shows a really diverse idea of America, I think, which is weird to say when you're dealing like with these little animals running around talking, living their lives. But I think it shows a very interesting side of diversity to America.
It's a much sweeter side of the immigrant tale of that particular time period than say other films like The Godfather. Which I love, obviously. I'm Italian, I'm all about it. But it's also very weird, Larry, to be an Italian person and like the mafia is the thing that we're like known for in all of culture. Woo! We created an entire club of men that murder. really well and not so well, and
that's like the
are really good at criminal.
Italian American story.
That is the Italian. I know. Oh man, that's a thing to be addressed. Anyways, but yeah, so I love American Tail. I think it's very sweet and cute, and I think Somewhere Out There is like one of the best like children's like songs. It's just like breaks your little heart. Okay, so
Dream can go awry.
So let's so while we're talking about the American Dream, let's talk about some of the more questionable movies that are like about the American Dream, about America, about like what's going on.
I think the white savior trope falls.
Yes, we talked about that a little bit in general, which we really kind of wanted to. Green Book and Driving Miss Daisy, which are basically interchangeable.
Yeah, might as well it's a bit of a redundant statement almost to say both
they
of their titles. They
flip-flopped the races.
They did flip-flop.
See, it's a white guy driving a black guy instead of the other way around. So it's progress.
But both of them, particularly I would say Green Book does kind of try to say something about American Dream a little bit more because he is the one being driven around, whereas Morgan Freeman's character is just a chauffeur. So he's not really aspiring to that dream in any way, like Mahershala Ali in Green Book is making something of himself in a way. But
Mahershala Ali is amazing. He's very good in the film, and he got an Oscar for that one too. Yeah. He deserved the actor. He deserves the Oscar anytime he's nominated. He's amazing. I was just thinking, I was like, also, this is another movie where it's like, this is the representation of Italian Americans that I get. Jesus, like, he's a bigot, and like the message is that bigots just need to hang out with Black people and they can learn about each other and then they won't be bigots anymore. And you know,
it takes a long time. Fighting and stuff all the way.
I understand that, like, right? Cities tend to be less racist. They tend to be more progressive because it's lots of different people that are all jumbled up together and we all have to learn how to live with each other. Whereas if you're living in a neighborhood where you only see people of one color all the time, it's much easier for you to other humans that don't look exactly like you. Yeah. So I understand that to a point, and I absolutely, like, I get from a psychological perspective, like, part of it is just like a lack of empathy and you need to learn empathy. But like, I just don't like, Green Book just makes the shitty bigot out to be a hero. Yeah. Which I think is the problem.
They have like a lot of unlikable moments with Mahershala Ali early, as in his character and his demeanor to Viggo Mortensen. So, and they kind of make Viggo out to be this lovable oaf type of person right from the get-go. Really characterized him that way, even when he is in full-on like bigot mode. Mm-hmm. So their characterizations right from the get-go, you're kind of like, this feels weird. This doesn't feel good. And then, as we move through, it doesn't, I don't know, any sort of, this is like the worst type of white savior moment. And then you learn that Mahershala's character's family wasn't like insulted at all. It was all just from the Italian guy's family's point of view and all of this. And you're just like, oh, well, that makes sense when you're watching a film. Yeah. So it's just gross from the hindsight too. Yeah, and it was just like also it was just gross that it won Best Picture. I think that was the other thing that like I think when I saw Green Book, I was more like, that's fine. I mean, me too. I was happy to watch Mahershala Ali. I was happy to learn about that figure, that person. I thought that was really interesting, but I was appalled when it won Best Picture because I think the Academy misread the memo. Yes. They were like, yes, look, we picked a movie about racism. The same movie we picked back in 1989. We picked it again.
Children, no. Did you watch the movie? No. Well, it's because you got to look at the people that are selecting the who are the judges and what types of people they are and where their perspective is. So that's a problematic one. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about the Native American representation. 'Cause that's always kind of like a, so the two
And
that
when
we
you
brought up
think about
were,
American patriotism, Native American representation should be top of our list of American patriotism.
yeah.
But once again, we're having a real hard time addressing that one still. I feel like we're going to talk about Last Mohicans, which I think does address it. It's definitely like we talked
Yeah.
about. It makes white people out to not look good.
Yes, but it also then centers the entire story around white people.
Centers it around a good white, like there's always a good white person amongst.
At least Daniel Day-Lewis, they did not expect me to believe that Daniel Day-Lewis was a Native American man. I was confused. I had never seen it. It is one of my husband's favorite films, which I thought was adorable and also kind of interesting. But yeah, he thinks the soundtrack is amazing. I have to agree, the soundtrack is really good. He likes that it's everything. It's action, adventure, romance. It just did it for him as like a preteen boy. That was what he wanted. And obviously he has good taste, right? It won an Oscar. Was it Best Picture? Yeah. Like
it's very well regarded.
And it's a good film, and I appreciate that. Yeah, as I was watching it at the beginning, I was like, "Am I supposed to believe that Daniel Day-Lewis is Native American?" Because I'm immediately uncomfortable, and it takes a while through the movie before they get into the story of like he's adopted. Yeah. Oh, okay. Whoo.
Yeah, then this movie would have been real problematic across the board,
Right? Well, and like at least and it's interesting, right? Because when it came out, that probably wasn't a thing that would have bothered anybody.
It from winning those awards, nothing.
Yeah. From my perspective in 2020, it was like, what? And I was like, oh, I really wish they would have told me that earlier, so I was not like deeply confused and scandalized.
Film,
and then there's a love story too, but there's another thing about like it's a white lady and a white dude, right? And they like, there's nothing complicated about that. So and you learn they do get into it a little bit more, right? About like why white people were committing fuckery throughout history, let's be real, and during the time period that Last of the Mohicans is set.
I wonder, just kind of as a theory, I wonder if it feels because America feels like they have more or less like made up for slavery, the white population, whereas I don't know that they feel like they have properly rectified what happened with Native Americans, that they're not as comfortable addressing it, because I feel like we've gotten to a point where we've made a lot of black centering films, particularly about the Civil War, but we haven't done nearly enough, and we really used it for obviously the Western era. So if we're talking about Westerns, Native Americans were in there. Native Americans were depicted, I'll say that, in those films, even TV. And it was always like this real favorable look towards white people. And, maybe they wouldn't kill all the Native
portrayal
Americans
of the savages.
And
but,
so I think we just haven't really addressed much of that.
I think part of it is that just like it's a population thing. Like there are so many fewer Native Americans than there are black people in the United States, that I think it's just
we don't have the directors, we don't have the directors,
and it's
hired even if they're there.
It sucks because it's just like a numbers game at some point, and like it's a numbers. I'm not saying like it. From the producer's perspective, it's like they look at it as a numbers game. Like
it's a lot more work for them to do.
Yes. Why do we want to make a movie about Native Americans when there's such a small portion of our potential audience? Let's make another movie about white people. And like that's shifting a lot. And I think a big part of it is that like white people have been very vocal about the fact that we're like, no, we would like to hear some other stories, please. Please. Yeah. Thank you. I think there's certainly room for Native Americans, but
I've started to see, and I think it's because they're more indie films, and I think they
Yes.
have like native
Yeah.
directors or writers. I'm seeing films that are focusing on Native American experience in the U.S. right now, and
Yeah.
high suicide rates and the mental health issues that run rampant, unfortunately, in the Native populations.
Yeah, I wonder if it's also partially that it like they almost feel isolated, like because they kind of they're on these reservations. They kind of have their own space and their own culture, and I wonder if like part of it is that because we are not exposed to them and we're not as integrated, I guess, that you just don't get as much of it. I don't know.
I think we're still at a point where I think Native Americans are when they are in like mainstream films, they're always the mythical, like mystical wise man,
and that's the problem is that we had this period. So we started in this period of like Indians are savage.
Yeah.
And that was like the beginning. And then at some point in like, I want to say in like the late 80s, early 90s, it shifted into this. We did a horrible thing. And the Native Americans are magical, mystical, perfect group of people who are, they created all of these positive stereotypes about Native Americans, which basically kind of just like continued on the problem of like stereotyping an entire group of people, and it still becomes this like white culture thing, right? And I feel like in the 90s it was like dream catchers and like feathers in your hair and that
very
right
nature
and like
positive.
Yes, and that's like where this really where this cultural appropriation problem like started, and like that's when we look at it and we're like, oh geez, can you guys like calm down and stop and like actually figure out what you're talking about, and maybe like it's misguided appreciation.
And I mean, and that definitely expands out, like obviously to sports. Washington DC, we put enough pressure on with the Black Lives Matter movement last year. I'm glad we also confounded that to be like, hey, Washington, let's come back to you too. While we're talking about oppressed people, take the name Redskins off the damn logos already. Like, Jesus Christ.
It is crazy how long that was a thing.
So even in sports and everything, other races we're not just, there's no Chicanos or there's beaners or wetbacks running around like no New Mexico wetbacks, because people would go ham immediately. Like, there would be no standing for that.
I will say that Italians would be very excited about like the New York Guidos. We'd be all about it.
Maybe a certain name, but some of the names, I don't know. Still.
No.
I'm like, girl.
I'm just saying Italians are very excited about their whatever is Italian. They're like excited about it.
I mean, I guess if you name yourself, if a Mexican owned the team and decided to do it, then maybe people would get behind it. But
I don't think they would. I think they would still be very upset about it.
I guess if it's Chicano, it might be okay. Like that's a little bit more like, okay, that's cool. But some of the other ones. But so the fact is, the Native American depiction across the board, it's still just lacking.
Yeah.
And no matter how much people yell and scream, even with that pipeline situation, I mean, yelling and screaming.
So I don't know. I just said that. I say his name too often. I just remembered Pocahontas, which is another Native American movie that is problematic, historically inaccurate, and also wonderful.
I know people hate Pocahontas for some of the things. I love it. I'm sorry.
Listen. The music is amazing. The story, if you take away the fact that it was supposed to be based on a real person and you let it exist as it is on its own, it is fine.
It has some of the best music. Oh, the music is amazing.
Music is so good. And they did, all of the voice actors are Native people.
And this was mid-90s, 94.
Yes. We were talking about this. Disney tried.
They tried. And same thing with some of their other animated films of the 90s. Aladdin, not so much. But moving after Aladdin, we'll move to the next Aladdin was one of the first ones. So, you know, but even the actress who voiced Pocahontas, obviously she probably gets this question. I heard her speak at a convention and she was like, I understand. There are a lot of problems, you know, obviously with depicting Pocahontas in this way, but in honesty, and somebody from the crowd who was a native girl even said, this was it though, you know, this was, I mean, it was kind of a milestone to have Pocahontas in a big animated film in that form and being celebrated. She was a strong, really good character. So
also, Pocahontas's real life story is like incredibly depressing.
Very sad. It cannot be an animated film. If they're going to ever tell Pocahontas' story as it is.
No. Sacagawea's story. That's what I want.
Well, that's what people were like. They shouldn't have done Pocahontas. They should have done Sacagawea because it's a more like, it's more.
Yeah, but she was already pregnant. She already had a baby and everything. We can't get a love story out of that. That's going to be a Pixar film. Let's do that.
And if they had done like just a made up person, I'm sure people would have gotten mad too if they just made up a Native American character and didn't base it off of something. So
it also might have been better, almost maybe if they had like used like some of their mythology. They have fascinating, really good, interesting, fun
Disney
mythology.
Didn't quite do so. While they did a good job on the casting, they didn't do quite enough legwork on the native culture itself, especially the tribe Pocahontas came from. They didn't consult people like they should have. That's where they faltered more. But yeah, I don't know. It's a long, lengthy conversation, but one I think we should continue to have anytime we talk about American history and being a proud American. I think we need to continue to help uplift Native communities and their voices. And it's not quite there yet, but hopefully we'll be getting there soon.
I had Lone Ranger here on the list, but that's just like one more thing to add into that list.
That is
like,
just yikes. Now that is yikes. See, and that's way later than something like Last of Mohicans, and it is way worse when it comes to representation.
Right, exactly.
Lone Ranger, 2010s Lone Ranger.
So,
it came out in the 2000s.
So since we're on this like problematic train, we're going to keep on rolling right into the movies about America that are kind of like the anti-American. It's not like they're against America.
Before we actually get there, I forgot to mention this because it's a bedrock of American cinema. And it was kind of American dream when it came out, and it is extremely problematic and should always be looked at with a very negative eye in today's world. Birth of a Nation, if we're talking about patriotic films. It is not criticizing America. Instead, it is making the KKK out as heroic figures protecting American values and cultures.
Yeah, it also makes Black people out to be like lunatic criminals and rapists and like full on. It's horrifying.
It's horrifying. It's horrifying.
Not even, just doesn't mention that there are no actual Black people in it. It is all like blackface on top of the fact that it's also just terrible, which I guess is, I don't know how to feel about that. I'm like, I'm glad it wasn't really Black people, but also
horrible practice that it got called out on. And so Birth of a Nation is the dark side of American history and incarnate.
It sucks because, as we talked about this, it is the first full-length film ever created. So it has this forever place. It has a forever place in film history. Yes. Because it was first. So, and you know what? Maybe it's best that it is not forgotten so that we can always point to it and be like, you see this fuckery? This is what film can do when wielded improperly.
And you see what they funded? You see what they decided was worthy to be the first ever full-length feature film?
Do you know, was it Woodrow Wilson used to just play Birth of the Nation in the White House all the time. He was like, look at this amazing film.
It was just as like that's where we came from, and that was what was viewed as this wonderful patriotic messaging was Birth of a Nation to kick things off.
Ugh.
The worst of the quote unquote American dream
Uh,
style patriot film.
Okay, great. So,
Yes.
well, as we're moving along, we want to talk about these like more like full on like anti-American like things that like really kind of approach the dark side of America
And
and
decide to use their platform as a criticism of what America
yeah.
is doing.
So the first one, let's start like chronologically, like in history, 12 Years a Slave, which is a devastating film.
A brutal watch.
Very, it's incredible. I think that's Lupita Nyong'o's first film.
So that was her first film and her Oscar-winning role, which very well deserved because she was amazing.
She was incredible. And
directed by a Black director.
And it's based on a true story, which is horrifying. And I think it's. I know Roots came before it, but Roots is another one of those made-for-TV movies, so I don't know how much that qualifies as like films. But it is one of the like first films I can remember seeing that really full-on dealt with the like horror of slavery, of how absolutely tragic and terrible it really was. I think,
and while there's like the Brad Pitt character, like there's a couple of okay white people, it's not one that really has that white savior type of person. Like there are a couple in passing who are like better white people who are a little bit nicer to them. But it is like the story of the Black people of history. And I think it was very much needed when it came out still.
It tends to be very much, it definitely feels like, it's very much glazed over, right? Like Gone with the Wind is a pretty old film, but they really don't, it's the opposite of what like the representation of slavery should be, right? Like it's not only are these terrible stereotypical characters, they don't suffer at all. They don't have much of an identity. I mean, I love that the woman who played Mammy, oh my God, what's her name? She won an Oscar. That's cool.
Then you hear the story at the Oscars.
Yeah, and then you hear that she wasn't like allowed in the same door as everyone else. And you're like, wow, that's
sad and horrible.
Shitty. And and then you think about the fact that like that was the only role to play in that time period was mammies and slaves and things. And I'm trying to think. I really don't feel like there are very many movies that deal with it. In
the type of fashion. I mean, because we have a lot about slavery, but it's at some point it does. The reason where slavery genre is getting so much like from the Black community, particularly one, because so many of these films, and you could argue 12 Years a Slave to a point as well, start to feel like this almost like black pain torture porn when we deal with this.
So I went to a museum. I went to this place called the Whitney Plantation, which is it's right outside of New Orleans, and it's the only plantation that actually focuses on the Black experience of living on a plantation. Which, I think we kind of talked about it, that like a plantation it should be treated as the location of horror that it was, right? It shouldn't just be this like, let's talk about the family in the big house, right? And I read a TripAdvisor review from this dude. He looked like a white dude. Maybe I'm just looking at his little tiny avatar photo, but this person was complaining that it wasn't devastating enough, that they like gave the plantation like a 3-star, 2-star review or something like that because they didn't feel devastated enough by the end of it. And what kind of a person do you need to be that you like write a bad review for the plantation, the only plantation museum that focuses on the actual slave experience is not devastating enough. And like, so I like listened to the audio tour, and like the curators of the plantation were very specific that like they didn't want it to be like torture porn, right? They didn't want they didn't want people to come out of it feeling like they were heartbroken and they were sad and like it was far away. They want to be able to come out of it like understanding the reality of what it was and how it fits into history and who these people were. And we really don't get enough of the stories that are like that. Yeah. As you were saying, like the 12 Years a Slave is definitely focused more on the like the horrors of it.
And I think once again, you can accept it more with 12 Years a Slave when it's like at least a Black director rather than, because it feels a little bit weird when it's this white director who is just like putting out this black pain torture porn, because you're just like, oh, this feels very not like gross actually, like especially when it keeps happening over and over again. It's like you can get this is my problem with rape in film as well. You can get your point across on how devastating something is without just like wham, like right in our face. We don't need to see the brutalization of rape. We can grasp the concept of how horrible it is without that, you know? And the same thing with like Black pain as slaves. There's a lot of ways that we can get the understanding without so much of that. And obviously, as you just said, that was the only roles available at a time, but there are more roles now as well that people should be getting nominated for, like Lupita Nyong'o in Us. She should have been nominated for that role as well. So let's start nominating Black actors when they're not playing slaves and maids and mammy stereotype of characters. It's 2021.
So I was trying to, there was another thing that it covered. I want to say it was the Georgia Rebellion, but it wasn't. There's a sick ass slave revolt that I would love to see a movie about, because it's like fucking inspiring, the number of like slaves that banded together to try and literally fight for freedom. They it started in Louisiana, and their goal was to go to New Orleans and liberate all of the slaves, and it failed. Obviously, we would have heard about it, but that's the Braveheart story that I want to hear.
Is it?
Right?
I just want to double check, because there was one that kind of got brushed under because of the director not being great, Nate Parker. But it was also called The Birth of a Nation. So I think his idea was to take back that, title. And it was about a slave rebellion.
German
Turner.
Coast. That's what it was.
The Nat Turner Rebellion of Slaves.
I think that might be it. That sounds right.
So maybe check that movie out, Ren.
Great. Maybe no, not that one. So it's something different. That's okay. So it's the 1811 German Coast Uprising, and it was it was like ended up being like 500 people that were involved in the whole thing. After the whole thing, it's a sick ass story, and it's the Braveheart story that I wish we could see. So anyways, speaking of like American, like I want to see, instead of that like torture porn, I want to see like, if we're going to talk about slavery, I want to talk about like, I think that this is one of the things that I really felt like I kind of was very clear at the plantation, the Whitney plantation, is that like at no point in time was anybody unaware that what was happening was not okay, right? Like they didn't want slaves to learn how to read or write because that was dangerous, that they could potentially be able to communicate with each other across distances, that like they could potentially learn something. They didn't want them to gather in churches because they just didn't want them to gather. Like they understood from the very beginning that this was not okay, and that they had to actively fight against the fact that these were humans, these were real humans, that being enslaved was not natural to them, that it wasn't like however much this, at that point in time, they were trying to push that ideology of like, oh, it's just this is the
They didn't
natural
actually-
order of
They
things.
knew.
They knew it was horrifying, and there was no point, right? Like it's right, and I don't think enough of that is explored.
No.
And I would love to see more of it. And so
recently, we've gotten movies like The Big Short, which is a heavy criticism on the U.S. system, and unfortunately, all these years after it's been released, still applicable. So take that as you will.
The Big Short was it was fantastic. I think the best thing about The Big Short was the asides, where they took these really complicated financial topics and like explained them to you.
Celebrities to come out
in an
Margot
entertaining,
Robbie.
Yeah. And it's like, and it's one of those important things, right? Where like we need to understand why what they did was not okay. Why this was a problem and why this wasn't just an accident. And it definitely felt like before this movie came out, right? It just seemed like, oh no, there was an accidental destruction of our system. And there's people that were saying like, it's the bank's fault and it's this fault. And like, you had no, and I was like, I don't know. It seems like we're just blaming people. And then like, they're like, no, listen. So they, and like laid it out in a way that made you go, oh, they're villains. They're legitimately villains. I will say I didn't like that technique as much in Cheney, which is another like anti-America film.
Very anti-America, but it was not done nearly as well.
No,
I actually didn't like Vice much at all.
That's what it was. Yeah, Vice.
And I despised Dick Cheney and still did not like Vice much at all. So yeah, that should tell you. I was the target that should have loved something like Vice, and I did not. So wasn't able to replicate it. And I think that's why, because he tried to use that same Big Short formula. It didn't apply.
Yeah,
to the story that was being
told. I don't think
it's hard with Dick Cheney because, as the movie fully admits right at the beginning, he was so damn secretive and didn't let anybody know what the hell he was doing. All that illegal bullshit.
It seemed very speculative, and there I have a hard time with it when it's speculative, but it's like portrayed as if it is not.
Yeah, and that's the problem there. Whereas The Big Short, we have the facts.
I also feel like with The Big Short, that aside thing that was like necessary, right? Like you needed somebody there to translate these complicated terms for you. Whereas like I don't think it was as necessary in. I
also want to talk about the Purge films. We just had one come out this weekend. So they've actually taken over the 4th of July weekend. All of the Purge movies now come out over this weekend. And I know a lot of people don't love them. They do vary in quality, and they are not subtle. That's the one thing with the Purge films. They have an agenda, and they lay it out right on you with no qualms. But I think it's really interesting, whereas the Saw movies tried to have like this moral compass beneath the horror. We don't get a lot of horror movies that really do that. Most of the big horror movies are slashers. They're more fun. You're just trying to have a fun time killing people. So that's what I've always at the very least appreciated about The Purge and the movies is that they are very much like, no, America, this is basically what is going on out here in America, just we'll let it be legal. Like, so that's the allegory is y'all want to kill poor people. Y'all want to kill these people of color. If you could, we know that the government, we wouldn't, well, particularly this past government, wouldn't put it past you to just make it legal to go ahead and off the homeless so we don't have to deal with them anymore. And then each one, they kind of take on a little bit different of a story. This last one had a lot to do with like immigration and borders. But at the very least, I appreciate The Purge for trying, even if it's about as subtle as a humpback whale in a fish tank. So,
It does have a very Hunger Games sort of approach to it.
And that's obviously another one that has an allegory. It's not patriotic because it's not set in our real world, but a very much an allegory to our society of capitalism.
I would love. That's another. I think I need more. I need more anti-capitalist. Listen, I believe in capitalism in a lot of ways, but I think there's problems when our government becomes about capitalism. When it's like when that is capitalism takes care of itself. We don't need a government that is all also on top of it and making sure that like
that's a big part of The Big Short too. It's a
yeah.
very this is why capitalism is failing America. This is
Yes,
we're not,
yeah.
it's not
The problem with
working for us.
capitalism, well, it's the problem with capitalism as it is right now is mainly that like the money is too powerful. Money is like this self sustaining monster, right? Like if you have enough money, you can just keep fixing things so that you keep making more money. And there's just also like the problems of like the mentality of like that capitalism should be the only way, and then we shouldn't help anyone at any point, right? And it's this idea of like we have no problem helping corporations, right? It's like we're happy to give bailouts and handouts to large corporations to sustain capitalism, but like rugged individualism for people that are suffering and struggling without a corporate identity. So I think The Big Short kind of addresses it, and that seems like that's a little bit what The Purge is trying to do.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated topic to try and like cover in a film, and I think you like
especially you can't get too far deep into it with a horror film like that,
right?
Because people aren't really here to hear a whole lot of that talking. You need to interject it with some sort of murder or thrills or run. You have to interject that into the movie.
Oh, we talked about horror. You didn't talk about what you did last summer. I was just thinking
about
on
our list. I know what you did last summer. Takes place over 4th of July weekend, which I had totally forgotten about.
Those do not count.
I will say this. I Know What You Did Last Summer has my favorite chase scene in a horror film. Sarah Michelle Gellar's like run for her life, like chase is my fave. So
really?
Maybe possibly second to Drew Barrymore's opening in Scream.
Oh, hers is good. I don't remember Sarah Michelle Gellar's off the top of my head, but I definitely remember. I did a rewatch of all the Screams. Like,
talk about one of the best openings for a horror film ever. Scream is so good, but. We're not here for Scream. Scream has nothing to do with patriotism.
I also remember how like they like all the posters were like Drew Barrymore was like all over the posters. She was like the only thing. She's in there for like 5 minutes and they kill her off immediately.
Lord.
I think that's one of the greatest things that has ever happened in horror. That is a full on like gotcha to the audience. Like ha ha ha. Now you have to sit here and watch Neve Campbell. Yes. Which like whatever. Neve Campbell was still kind of famous.
We love her now.
So. Yeah. Scream is amazing. We can talk about those around Halloween. We'll get to our horror movies, but
we have like Judas and the Black Messiah that came out.
That's what Black Klansman was another one.
Most of Spike Lee's filmography, especially when he's on his game, like Black Klansman. He's very good at criticizing America like through their past actions while also paralleling it with today. To really show like this is what we did back in the 60s, back in the 70s, whenever. And guess what? It's not changed as much as you would like to believe. So I think
it's great. Black Klansman was great at that. Although I do feel like right at the end they had at the end or the beginning they had like straight up Donald Trump clips, and I was like, all right, that's a little on the head.
He did that on Defy Bloods too, I'm pretty sure. Spike Lee. If there's one thing with Spike, he's gonna much like The Purge, he's gonna throw in something real hard at you.
Something ham-fisted.
He'll grab that hammer and smash you at least once or twice in his film. So you can't escape the unsubtle delivery with Spike.
No, no, that's true.
But the actual film itself, I do think does a great job of being like, this is what happened, and this could conceivably be happening right now too. So totally great.
And I think the other one that I had on my list that is not Spike Lee. I almost said Spike Jones. I was like, no, that is a very white dude. Spike Lee is Selma, which I think is another. That one's really good because it's Ava DuVernay. That was her first thing, which I love. Black woman. We didn't get enough women directors, but that one was really moving, and that was devastating and also like inspiring. and really, really delve into a thing that I knew about, that we knew about, but like didn't really fully grasp deeply enough, I don't think.
And that's the thing, I guess, yeah, with Martin Luther, of course, we all know a decent amount about him, because one of the few Black figures in history that people know a decent amount about from their courses. But
He's
I
got
think
a whole holiday.
Selma definitely, and I appreciated that it didn't fully sugarcoat MLK. It showed, because that was the whole thing with the FBI, similar to what we saw in Judas and the Black Messiah. They ran a whole smear campaign on Martin Luther King and drug up all this nonsense, whether true or not, had nothing to do with what was happening.
Nope.
So they did all that, but it was a really inspiring, and it was beautifully directed. I mean, talk about a directorial debut.
It was a gorgeous film. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, I really enjoy these films that are like, no, the government is not. They're not truthful all the time. This is not. You can't believe everything that you hear. Like, it seems really important to have those correction sort of films.
Under Hoover was a menace.
I
mean, we had Billie Holiday, that movie too, this year.
I didn't see that one.
That showcased that the government was out for her too. The FBI was just like on her ass for a freaking singer, that they were just on her ass for nothing, because she wrote a song about people being lynched in the South. So people were mad, or she co-wrote or sung. But yeah, so Hoover and his FBI G-man, I mean, we could have a
I was just thinking about how, like, you're like, oh, she wrote a song about how people were being lynched in the South and people were mad. And I'm like, that's not at all like today. People never get mad when you point out that racism happened.
So, I mean, and I think those are actually some of the best versions of those that are like, here's what we've done literally in the past. And, oh, look, here's what we're doing right now. Yes. Yay.
So to try to cap it off, I always so my big 4th of July thing that I like to say, right, because I don't want to end on like a downer note, that a lot of people have like a problem with the American flag and a lot of the symbols of the United States around the 4th of July, because of the problems, right? Like the Revolutionary War was fought by a bunch of white dudes, and the main people that benefited were white dudes, and they have the opportunity to end slavery there, and they didn't, and they had all these like problematic things like the 3/5 compromise, and a lot of people just like have there's reasonably so a lot of strange things that are attached to the American flag. And so on the 4th of July, the symbol that I like to bring up to people is the Liberty Bell. And the reason I do that is because the Liberty Bell is the bell that called the people to the square in Philadelphia. So presumably was the bell that rang when they first read out the Declaration of Independence. And basically rang in freedom for the colonies. But obviously did not ring in freedom for everyone. And then as time went on, you had these movements that took the Liberty Bell as their symbol of the freedom that was still not granted to everyone in the United States. You had the suffrage movement that used the Liberty Bell. You had the abolitionist movement use the Liberty Bell. And then you had the civil rights movement that also used the Liberty Bell, because it was this symbol of freedom ringing in, and the echo that still needs to be reaching every American. So what I like about the Liberty Bell as a symbol is that it is a symbol of America's progress, of how America has gotten better. We are by no means perfect. We are by no means unresponsible for the shitty things that have happened in the past. But on the 4th of July, I like to remember that the United States has set up a way for us to get better. And over the years, Americans have taken that ideal that was set up, this ideal of freedom and equality, and they have fought tooth and nail to acquire more equality and freedom than we've ever had in the United States before. So let's take the Liberty Bell and just keep on going for it. And we should make better movies.
Yes.
and
Better
love the
movies.
good ones.
Yeah.
Cool.
But
So I think we are all set. So I think we should cap off this one last thing with Larry. What is your favorite patriotic film? What are you going to be watching for the 4th of July?
Oh my gosh. My favorite patriotic film is probably I mean it's probably like Saving Private Ryan, honestly.
You're
I
going to
do
go with
love Saving
Private
Private
Ryan. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and if I'm gonna watch something tomorrow, oh god, maybe I'll go with that. Maybe I'll just stick with Saving Private Ryan.
Rock on, rock on.
And you?
If we're allowed, I'm gonna have to go with Hamilton, for sure. That is the top of the list. But I will probably be watching. So we're recording this on the 3rd, but it will be the 4th when you hear this, or later. I don't know. Maybe in several years when you finally find our podcast. I will be. I'm gonna find Valiant, and I'm gonna watch that pigeon movie.
Yeah.
I want to watch it now.
And
Tim
what,
Curry
Revolution?
and Ewan McGregor and Ricky Gervais's voices. I'm like here for it. So that's what I want to watch. Oh, and that terrible one.
Yes.
I might try and find the terrible one too. The Revolution, the Al Pacino one. Legendary. So excited.
Well, thank you all so much for listening. Let us know what your favorite patriotic film is. And what's your 4th of July go-to watch every year, or do you mix it up? Let us know either in the comment section if you are watching this on YouTube, or you can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram in the comment section at Cinema Snarks. Ren, where can people find you specifically online?
You can find me on Twitter at Ren Manley. I think so. I think that's my handle.
It is.
Larry has me on there a little bit more often because he sends me all of our Zoom links via Twitter. Yes. So I have to sign in at least once a week.
There you go. And then on Instagram.
And on Instagram at RenniePoo13.
Just a little more active over there. Just
a little more active on Instagram. Yeah.
And then you can find me on YouTube, where our video versions of these podcasts are posted. ChillyBoy Productions. I'm also ChillyBoy Productions on Instagram and ChillyBoy YT on Twitter. So check us out. Hopefully you are following us on whatever platform you are listening. Rate us. Give us that 5-star if you can.
Tell your friends.
Yes, spread the word. Make sure to come back. We are hoping to add some new things with the production side of the podcast soon, like a theme song. So hopefully that will be on this episode, next episode, some episode, but continue to grow with us. Give feedback and suggestions. We'd love to hear it. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you next time.